The first gunshot echoed through Terminal C like thunder trapped in glass. Detective Sarah Chen's hand moved to her service weapon before her mind could process what was happening. Around her, travelers froze mid-stride, coffee cups suspended. In air, children's laughter cut short, the mechanical hum of the baggage carousel suddenly deafening in the silence that followed. Then chaos erupted. Screams pierced the air as people scattered like startled birds. A woman in a business suit stumbled over her rolling suitcase, her phone clattering across the polished floor. An elderly man pressed himself against a pillar, his veteran's cap trembling in his white-knuckled grip. The departure board flickered. Overhead, flight numbers blurring into meaningless digits as panic consumed the space. But it wasn't the gunshot that made Sarah's blood turn to ice water. It was the dog. 60 pounds of German Shepherd launched through the air with the precision of a guided missile, its powerful body cutting through the screaming crowd. The K9's eyes, amber and fierce, locked onto Sarah with an intensity that made her stomach drop. She barely had time to brace herself before the dog's paws hit her chest, sending her stumbling backward against a newsstand. Magazines scattered around them like fallen leaves. Time and Newsweek covers smiled up from the floor, their headlines about hope and healing now trampled under Sarah's boots. The dog's weight pressed against her tactical vest, its hot breath fogging her badge as it stared into her face with an expression that seemed almost desperate. "Max, off!" A voice cut through the mayhem, authoritative, strained, edged with something that sounded like grief. The dog's handler emerged from the crowd, his TSA uniform disheveled, his radio crackling with overlapping emergency calls. Officer David Martinez had been working airport security for 8 years, had seen everything from smuggled weapons to human trafficking attempts, but Sarah had never seen terror quite like this in his dark eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, David," gasped, reaching for Max's collar. "He's never done anything like this before. Max, heel." But the dog didn't move. Instead, Max's massive head tilted, and he did something that made Sarah's heart stop completely. He whimpered, not the aggressive bark of an attack dog, not the excited yip of a playful pet. This was the sound of an animal in pain, deep, guttural, heartbroken, the kind of sound that reaches into your chest and squeezes until you can't breathe. Sarah's hand, which had been moving toward her weapon, froze halfway to her holster. Max's amber eyes bore into hers, and she saw something there. That didn't belong in a police dog's gaze. Recognition. Desperate, impossible recognition. "Ma'am, I need to see your identification." David's voice cracked on the words, his hand shaking as he finally managed to clip a leash to Max's collar. "Standard procedure after an incident." Sarah's fingers fumbled for her badge, muscle memory taking over as her mind reeled. The second gunshot. Where had the second gunshot come from? Her ears were still ringing, but underneath the chaos she could hear it now. Boots on tile, radios crackling, the systematic sweep of other officers securing the terminal. But Max never took his eyes off her face. "Detective Sarah Chen, Metro PD," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was catching the 3:15 to Denver. Department business." David's radio crackled. "All units be advised, shooter is down. Repeat, threat neutralized. Single perpetrator. Domestic dispute gone public. No other threats identified." Relief should have flooded through Sarah, but it didn't come. Because as David took her badge with trembling fingers, she saw his face change. Color drained from his olive complexion like water from a broken glass. His lips moved soundlessly as he read her name, her badge number, her department. "Chen," he whispered. "Sarah Chen, badge number 2847. Max's whimper grew louder, more urgent. The dog pressed closer, his wet nose nudging Sarah's hand with surprising gentleness. She looked down and froze. There, barely visible beneath Max's collar, was a small metal tag. Not his standard TSA identification, something else, something personal, something that read, "In memory of Officer James Chen. End of watch, March 15th, 2022. The terminal sounds faded to white noise. Sarah's vision tunneled until all she could see was that small piece of metal, those 8 words that rewrote everything she thought she knew about this moment. Her brother's name. Her brother's badge number. Her brother's... "Oh God," David breathed. And when Sarah looked up, she saw tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. "You're Jimmy's sister. You're Sarah." The world tilted sideways. Jimmy had never mentioned working with airport security. Jimmy had been Metro PD just like her. Jimmy had died in the line of duty 18 months ago, killed during a routine traffic stop that went horribly wrong. Jimmy had never even liked dogs. Had he? Max pressed his muzzle against Sarah's palm and she felt something wet that wasn't from his nose. Her own tears, falling without permission, without warning. Around them, the terminal was returning to its normal rhythm. Travelers being redirected, crime scene tape being strung, witness statements being taken. But in this small bubble of space between a newsstand and a coffee cart, time had stopped entirely. "He knew you," David said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Somehow, he knew you were Jimmy's sister. I don't understand it, but he knew." Sarah's hand found the soft fur behind Max's ears, and the dog leaned into her touch with a sigh that sounded like recognition, like relief, like a prayer finally answered. She thought of Jimmy's apartment, which she'd cleaned out 6 months after his death. She thought of the things she'd found there, the police manuals, the commendations, the photos of family barbecues and Christmas mornings. She thought of the things she hadn't found, the gaps in Jimmy's life that she'd never thought to question, the stories he'd never told, the partners he'd never mentioned. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 years, David replied. Jimmy was part of a joint task force, drug interdiction at the airport. Max was his K9 partner before he transferred back to patrol. They were, his voice broke, they were family. Max's tail thumped once against the floor, a soft rhythm that sounded like approval, like agreement, like love. Sarah looked into those amber eyes again and saw her brother's kindness reflected there, saw the loyalty Jimmy had always inspired, the protective instincts that had gotten him killed, the love that somehow transcended death and time, and 18 months of grief. "He's been waiting," she realized aloud. "Haven't you, boy? You've been waiting for family to come home." Max's answer was another soft whimper, but this time it sounded different. This time it sounded like hope. 18 months earlier. "Chen, you've got a visitor." Detective Sarah Chen looked up from her paperwork, surprised. It was past 8 on a Thursday evening, and the precinct was nearly empty, except for the skeleton crew manning the phones. She wasn't expecting anyone. "Conference. Room 2, Sergeant Mills added, his expression unreadable. "And Chen, take your time. Your time." The walk down the hallway felt longer than usual. Sarah's heels clicked against the worn linoleum, each step echoing in the fluorescent-lit corridor. Through the frosted glass, she could see a silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar in a way that made her heart skip. Jimmy was sitting at the scratched conference table, still in his patrol uniform, his duty belt hanging heavy on his hips. But something was different about him. His usually pristine uniform was rumpled, his hair disheveled, and there were shadows under his dark eyes that hadn't been there the last time she'd seen him. "Hey, sis." His smile was tired, but genuine. "Sorry to drop by unannounced. I was in the neighborhood." Sarah slid into the chair across from him, studying her brother's face. They'd grown up sharing everything, secrets, dreams, fears. But lately, Jimmy had become a mystery. Phone calls that went straight to voicemail, cancelled family dinners, vague excuses about special assignments that he couldn't discuss. "You look like hell," she said softly. Jimmy's laugh was hollow. "Thanks. You always know exactly what to say to make a guy feel better." "I'm serious, Jim. When's the last time you slept? Actually slept, not just dozed off in your patrol car?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, the same gesture he'd used since childhood when he was trying to avoid a difficult conversation. "I've been working a case, joint task force thing. It's complicated." "Everything's complicated with you lately." Sarah leaned forward, her detective instincts kicking in. "Talk to me. What's going on?" For a moment, Jimmy looked like he might actually answer. His mouth opened, then closed. His fingers drummed against the table in the nervous rhythm she remembered from when they were kids and he'd broken something valuable. "There's this dog," he said finally. "A dog? German Shepherd. Police K9. His name's Max." Jimmy's expression softened, and for the first time in months, Sarah saw a glimpse of her real brother. His handler got killed in the line of duty 6 months ago. Max has been struggling. They were going to retire him, maybe put him down. He wasn't responding. To new handlers. Sarah waited. Jimmy had always been a storyteller, but he needed space to find his words. They assigned him to me temporarily. Part of this airport security detail I've been working. Drugs, trafficking, that kind of thing. Jimmy's voice grew quieter. Sarah, I've never had a partner like this, human or otherwise. It's like he can read my mind, like he knows things before I do. That's what good K9s do, Jim. They're trained to— No. Jimmy shook his head firmly. This is different. Yesterday we were running a sweep through Terminal C routine stuff, but Max just stopped, planted himself in front of this woman's luggage and wouldn't move, wouldn't respond to commands, wouldn't budge, just sat there staring at her suitcase. Sarah could see where this was going, but she let him continue. Turned out she was carrying $30,000 in cash and enough fentanyl to kill half the city. But here's the thing. There was no way Max could have smelled it. The drugs were vacuum-sealed, hidden in a false bottom. Even our best detection equipment might have missed it. Maybe he picked up on her behavior. Body language, stress signals. She was calm as anything, cool as ice. No tells, no nervous gestures. Nothing that would have flagged her to a human. Officer. Jimmy leaned forward, his eyes intense. Sarah, I think this dog sees things we don't, knows things we can't. Sarah studied her brother's face. Jimmy had always been practical, methodical. He wasn't given to flights of fancy or supernatural explanations. If he believed there was something special about this dog, there probably was. What aren't you telling me? She asked. Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Max's first handler, Officer Rodriguez, he died in a shootout at the airport. Drug dealers who'd been using the cargo area to move product. Rodriguez and Max had been tracking them for weeks. Jimmy's hands clenched into fists on the table. The dealers knew they were getting close, set up an ambush. Jim, Rodriguez took 3 bullets to the chest, died instantly. But Max stayed with him until backup arrived. 30 minutes, Sarah. 30 minutes sitting next to his partner's body, protecting him even though it was too late. Sarah felt her throat tighten. She could picture it. The loyal dog, confused and grieving, refusing to leave his fallen handler's side. When they finally got Max away from the scene, he wouldn't eat for 2 weeks. Wouldn't respond to commands. The department shrinks said he had PTSD. Can you believe that? A dog with PTSD. Animals form bonds, Jim. Deep ones. Losing a partner would be traumatic for any K9. That's what I thought too, until I saw the surveillance footage. Jimmy pulled out his phone, swiped to a video file. The screen showed a grainy, black and white view of what looked like a cargo area. Concrete floors, metal shelving, industrial lighting. This is from the night Rodriguez died, Jimmy said quietly. Watch Max. On the small screen, Sarah could see a German shepherd moving. Through the frame, nose to the ground, following a scent trail. Normal K9 behavior. But then the dog stopped, head up, ears forward. He was staring at something off camera, something the viewer couldn't see. This is 15 minutes before the shooting, Jimmy said. Watch what he does. Max began to back away from whatever he was looking at. Not the retreat of a trained police dog encountering a threat. This was different, personal. The dog's body language screamed recognition, fear, betrayal. Rodriguez followed Max's lead, Jimmy continued. Trusted his instincts, but it was too late. The dealers were already in position. The video ended abruptly. Jimmy put his phone away, his expression haunted. I think Max knew, he said. I think somehow he knew what was coming. And I think he's been trying to protect his handlers ever since. Sarah reached across the table and covered her brother's hand with hers. Jim, what does this have to do with you looking like you haven't slept in a month? Jimmy's smile was sad. Because I think Max is trying to protect me from something. And I think whatever it is, it's getting closer. Present day. David Martinez led Sarah and Max through a maze of airport security corridors, past offices filled with monitors and file cabinets, past break rooms that smelled of stale coffee and exhaustion. Max walked between them, his leash, slack, his massive head held high with dignity. This was Jimmy's desk, David said, stopping in front of a small workstation tucked into a corner of the task force office. No one's touched it since he died. The desk was exactly what Sarah would have expected from her brother, meticulously organized, every pen in its place, every file folder labeled in his careful handwriting. But what caught her attention was the bottom drawer, which stood slightly ajar. Inside, she could see the corner of something that didn't belong in a police workspace, a dog toy, a worn rope that had seen hundreds of games of tug-of-war. He bought that for Max the second week they were partnered, David said softly. Max was still grieving Rodriguez, still wouldn't play or engage. Jimmy thought maybe. Max's ears perked up at the sight of the toy. He moved forward, gentle but insistent, until his nose touched the frayed rope. Then he did something that made Sarah's eyes burn with unshed tears. He picked up the toy and carried it to her, dropping it at her feet like an offering. "He's been waiting," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every day for 18 months, Max comes to this desk, sits here for exactly 15 minutes, then he goes back to work. But he's been waiting for someone to understand." Sarah knelt down and picked up the rope toy. It smelled like Jimmy, his cologne, his gun oil, the peppermint gum he always chewed. But underneath those familiar scents was something else. Something that spoke of loyalty and loss and love that transcended death. Max pressed his muzzle against her hand, and Sarah finally understood what her brother had been trying to tell her that night in the conference room. Some bonds are stronger than time, some love is more powerful than death, and some partnerships are meant to last forever. 3 days after the airport incident, Sarah's apartment had never felt smaller. She stood at her kitchen window, watching Max explore her tiny balcony garden. With the methodical precision of a trained investigator, the dog moved from plant to plant, cataloguing scents, memorizing territories, making himself at home in a space that had been hers alone for 3 years. The temporary custody arrangement had been David's idea. "Max needs time to adjust," he'd explained, "and honestly, after what happened at the airport, I think you both could use each other." Sarah had agreed without really thinking about it. Now, watching her brother's former partner investigate her tomato plants, she wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. Her phone buzzed. Text from her captain. "Chen, take the rest of the week. Process what happened. Report Monday." What happened? As if 3 words could encompass the seismic shift her world had undergone. As if discovering that her dead brother had lived an entire secret life could be summarized in a departmental memo. Max padded back inside, his nails clicking against the hardwood floors. He moved through her living room like he was mapping it, nose twitching as he catalogued the scents of her life. Pizza boxes from last Tuesday, the lavender candle she never lit, the fear sweat that had been clinging to her since the airport. He stopped in front of Jimmy's photo on her mantelpiece, the formal department portrait they'd used for his funeral. Max stared at the image for a long moment, then looked at Sarah with those impossibly intelligent amber eyes. "I know, boy," she said softly. "I miss him too." But even as she said it, Sarah realized how inadequate the words were. Her grief was sharp but abstract. She missed Jimmy's laugh, his terrible dad jokes, his protective big brother energy. Max's grief was something else entirely. Physical, visceral. The loss of a partner who'd shared danger and trust, and the kind of bond that only forms in life or death situations. Her doorbell rang. Max's reaction was immediate and startling. The dog, who'd been calm and gentle, suddenly went rigid, every muscle in his body coiled tight. His ears flattened against his skull, and a low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. "Easy, boy," Sarah murmured, but her hand instinctively moved to where her service weapon would normally be. She was off duty, unarmed, but Max's behavior had triggered every cop instinct she possessed. Through the peephole, she saw a familiar face. Detective Rick Morrison from Internal Affairs. They'd worked together a few times over the years. He was competent, thorough, and had the personality of wet cardboard. But he was also honest, which was more than Sarah could say for half the department. Max's growl deepened as she opened the door. Morrison, what brings you to my neighborhood? Sarah. Rick's smile was polite but strained. His eyes flicked to Max, then back to her face. Sorry to bother you at home. I was hoping we could talk about your brother. Jimmy's been dead for 18 months. What's left to talk about? May I come in? Sarah stepped aside, keeping one hand on Max's collar. The dog's body was vibrating with tension, his gaze fixed on Morrison like he was tracking a potential threat. Interesting. Dog, Morrison said, settling into her worn armchair. I heard about the incident at the airport, quite a reunion. He was Jimmy's canine partner. Apparently they were close. Apparently. Morrison pulled out a small notebook, the kind that made Sarah's stomach clench. IA only brought notebooks when they were building a case. Sarah, what do you know about your brother's work with the airport? Task force? Not much. He said it was drug interdiction. Why? Did he ever mention any irregularities? Problems with evidence handling? Concerns about other officers? Max's growl was barely audible now, but Sarah could feel the tension radiating from his body. Morrison, what the hell is this about? 3 weeks before your brother died, someone filed an anonymous complaint with IA. Allegations of evidence. Tampering in airport drug cases. Money and drugs going missing from the evidence locker. Sarah's blood went cold. You think Jimmy was... I don't think anything yet. I'm gathering information. Morrison's pen was poised over his notebook. The complaint specifically mentioned Officer James Chen and his canine partner as having unusual access to evidence. That's bullshit, and you know it. Sarah's voice was sharp, but underneath the anger was something else. Doubt, the tiny, poisonous seed of doubt that IA was designed to plant. Your brother made some large cash deposits in the months before his death. Deposits that don't match his patrol salary. How large? 15,000, then 20, then 35. Morrison's voice was gentle, almost apologetic. Sarah, I know this is hard to hear, but we have to follow the evidence. Max was no longer growling. Instead, he'd moved to sit directly between Sarah and Morrison, his massive body forming a protective barrier. His ears were up, alert, but his expression had changed. He wasn't angry anymore. He was watchful, calculating. Where's this evidence? Sarah asked. That's the problem. A lot of it went missing after your brother died. Files, surveillance footage, financial records, almost like someone knew we were investigating. Or like someone wanted it to look that way. Morrison studied her face. You think your brother was set up? I think Jimmy was the most honest cop I've ever known. And I think whoever filed that anonymous complaint knows exactly what happened to those missing files. Sarah... Max's head snapped toward the window. His ears were forward, his body tense with alert attention. Then Sarah heard it too. The low rumble of a motorcycle engine circling her building. Once, twice, 3 times. Expecting someone? Morrison asked. No. Sarah moved to the window, Max padding beside her. The motorcycle was black, sleek, with a rider in dark clothing and a full helmet. As she watched, the bike slowed, and she could feel the rider's attention focused on her building, on her window. The engine revved once, sharp and aggressive, then the bike disappeared around the corner. Max whimpered, the same heartbroken sound he'd made at the airport. Sarah, Morrison said quietly, is there anything you're not telling me? Anything your brother might have shared about his work, people he was worried about? Sarah thought about that night in the conference room. Jimmy's exhaustion. His strange comments about Max seeing things that others couldn't. His fear that something was getting closer. He said Max was trying to protect him from something, she said finally. Something that was getting closer. Morrison scribbled in his notebook. Protect him from what? He didn't know, but he trusted Max's instincts. Sarah looked down at the dog, who was still staring at the window where the motorcycle had been. And Max is still trying to protect. Protect who? Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. Unknown number. Detective Chen. Her voice was professionally neutral, but her heart was hammering. Stay away from the airport, a male voice said. Distorted, electronic, impossible to identify. Stop asking questions. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. The line went dead. Morrison was on his feet, notebook forgotten. Sarah, we need to... Max erupted into motion. The dog bolted to Sarah's front door, pawing at the handle, whining with urgent desperation. Then they heard it, footsteps in the hallway. Multiple sets, moving fast. "Back door," Sarah whispered. "Now!" But as they moved toward her kitchen, Max suddenly stopped. His nose was working the air, processing information that only he could understand. Then he did something that made Sarah's blood freeze. He moved to Jimmy's photo and knocked it off the mantelpiece with his nose. The frame shattered against the floor, and something small and metallic skittered across the hardwood. Key, taped to the back of Jimmy's photograph. Sarah picked it up with shaking fingers. It was small brass with numbers etched into the head. 4247, safety deposit box, Morrison said. The footsteps in the hallway had stopped. The silence was somehow more terrifying than the sound had been. Max padded to the back door, then looked at Sarah expectantly. His message was clear. "Time to go." "Morrison," Sarah whispered, "I think we're about to find out what Jimmy was really trying to protect." 2 hours later, at Metropolitan Savings Bank, the safety deposit box was small, unassuming, tucked away in the climate-controlled vault beneath the bank. Sarah's hands shook as she turned the key. Morrison standing guard behind her, Max pressed against her leg like a furry anchor. Inside were 3 items that would change everything she thought she knew about her brother's death. First, a USB drive labeled insurance. Second, a letter in Jimmy's handwriting addressed to Sarah. Third, a photograph of Max sitting beside a man in a TSA uniform, not David Martinez, someone else, someone whose face had been carefully scratched out with black ink. Sarah opened the letter with trembling fingers. Sarah. "If you're reading this, then I'm probably dead and Max found you. I told him if anything happened to me, he should find family. Dogs are smarter than we give them credit for. The airport task force isn't what it seems. Someone's been using our drug interdiction operations to move their own product. Clean drugs. Out, dirty money in. The perfect laundering operation. I've been gathering evidence for months. Everything's on the USB drive. Names, dates, financial records, surveillance footage. Enough to bring down the whole network. But Sarah, they know. I know. Max has been trying to warn me for weeks. He can sense things, danger, deception, betrayal. He knows who can't be trusted. I'm going to try to take them down through official channels, but if something happens to me, promise me you'll finish what I started. Trust Max. He'll keep you safe." And Sarah, the person leading this operation. It's not who you think it is. It's someone close to the investigation. Someone who knows every move we make before we make it. Watch your back. Trust no one except Max. Love you, sis. Jimmy P.S. Max's favorite treat is those bacon strips. From the pet store on 5th Street. He's earned every single one. Sarah's vision blurred as she finished reading. Behind her, Morrison was silent, but she could feel the weight of his presence, the careful attention he was paying to every word. "Sarah," he said finally, "we need to look at that USB drive." She turned to face him, and for the first time since the airport, Max's behavior made perfect sense. The dog wasn't protecting her from some unknown threat. He was protecting her from Morrison. Max was staring at the IA detective with the same expression he'd worn in the surveillance footage from the night Rodriguez died. Recognition, fear, betrayal. "How long have you been working with them?" Sarah asked quietly. Morrison's hand moved toward his jacket, but Max was faster. 60 pounds of trained police dog launched across the small vault space, and Morrison went down hard against the metal security boxes. "Max, hold," Sarah commanded, and the dog obeyed, pinning Morrison to the floor with his massive paws but not attacking. "Sarah, listen to me," Morrison gasped. "Your brother was going to destroy everything. Years of undercover work. We're this close to taking down the entire trafficking network. By becoming part of it, by infiltrating it, the money, the evidence, tampering, it was all part of the operation. Jimmy didn't understand. He was going to blow our cover and get a lot of good cops killed." Sarah pulled out her phone, but Morrison shook his head. "Who are you going to call? How do you know who else is involved? Your brother was right about one thing. This goes all the way to the top." Max growled low in his throat. and Sarah realized that her brother's partner was trying to tell her something. The dog's eyes flicked from Morrison to the safety deposit box, then back to Sarah. She looked down at the photograph again. The face had been scratched out, but she could see part of a name tag on the TSA uniform. The letters RIC were visible, not Rick Morrison, Rico something. "You son of a bitch," Sarah breathed. "You killed my brother." Morrison's laugh was bitter. "I didn't pull the trigger, but I made sure he was in the right place at the right time." Jimmy was going to destroy a year of undercover work. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made. For the greater good. For justice. Real justice. Not the kind that gets buried in bureaucracy and evidence lockers. Sarah looked at Max, who was still, holding Morrison down with disciplined precision, her brother's partner, the dog who'd been trying to warn Jimmy about the danger getting closer. The loyal animal who'd waited 18 months for family to come home and finish what Jimmy had started. "Max," she said softly. "Good boy. Very good boy." Then she picked up the USB drive and walked out of the vault, leaving Morrison pinned beneath. 60 pounds of righteously angry German Shepherd. It was time to finish what Jimmy had started. Metropolitan Police Headquarters, 6:47 p.m. Captain Elizabeth Reyes looked exhausted. She'd been Sarah's commanding officer for 4 years, had given the eulogy at Jimmy's funeral, had personally called Sarah with condolences and promises that justice would be served. Now she sat behind her desk, staring at the USB drive like it was a live grenade. "Jesus Christ, Chen, do you have any idea what you've stumbled into?" Sarah shifted in her chair, hyper-aware of Max's presence beside her. The dog had been calm during the drive to headquarters, but now his ears were up, alert, processing the tension in the room with the sensitivity of a seismograph, detecting earthquake tremors. "I have some idea. My brother uncovered a corruption ring using airport security to move drugs and launder money. Someone killed him to keep him quiet, and IA Detective Rick Morrison just confessed to being part of it." "Morrison confessed to you in a bank vault?" While Max was sitting on his chest, "Yeah." Captain Reyes rubbed her temples. "Sarah, this is huge. If even half of what's on this drive is accurate, we're looking at dozens of arrests, federal charges, a scandal that'll rock 3 different law enforcement agencies." Good. Reyes leaned forward. "Sarah, do you understand the position this puts the department in? Jimmy was investigating fellow officers, people we work with every day, people we trust." Max's head tilted slightly and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. It was the same expression he'd worn when Morrison was lying about the undercover operation. "Captain, are you suggesting we bury this?" "I'm suggesting we be smart about it. Chain of custody, proper procedures, making sure the evidence is admissible." Reyes picked up the USB drive, turning it over in her hands. "Let me take this to the proper authorities, federal prosecutors, FBI counterintelligence, people who know how to handle corruption cases, or people who know how to make evidence disappear." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah watched her captain's face, looking for tells, for the micro-expressions that might reveal deception. But Captain Reyes had been a cop for 22 years. If she was hiding something, she was good at it. Max stood up slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. He walked to the office door, then back to Sarah's chair, then to the door again. The message was clear. Time to leave. "Sarah," Captain Reyes said carefully, "I know you're grieving. I know this has been traumatic, but you need to trust the system. Trust me." The way Jimmy trusted Morrison? Morrison was dirty. We'll handle Morrison. But that doesn't mean everyone is compromised. Sarah stood, and Max immediately moved to her side. "I'll need copies of everything on that drive, for my own records." "Of course. I'll have tech services make copies tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I want you to go home, rest. Let us handle this properly." Something in her captain's tone made Sarah's cop instincts prickle. Too smooth, too reassuring. The kind of voice people used when they were trying to manage a situation rather than solve it. "Captain, how long have you known about the airport task force?" "What do you mean?" "Jimmy's assignment, his partnership with Max, the corruption investigation. How long have you known?" Captain Reyes was quiet for a moment too long. "Your brother requested the assignment 6 months before he died." Said he wanted to expand his experience beyond patrol work. Max's tail had stopped wagging. He was staring at Captain Reyes with the same intense focus he'd shown Morrison, the same look he'd given the scratched-out photograph. He requested it, Sarah repeated slowly. Or was he assigned? Sarah, because according to his personnel file, Jimmy never put in for a transfer. Never requested specialized assignment. Someone else initiated that transfer. Captain Reyes's smile faltered slightly. Personnel files can be incomplete. Sometimes transfers happen quickly, informally. Informally, right. Sarah clipped Max's leash to his collar. We'll be going now. Sarah, wait, the USB drive. Make your copies. I'll pick up mine tomorrow morning. But as Sarah reached for the door handle, Captain Reyes spoke again, and her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Detective Chen, as your commanding officer, I'm ordering you to surrender any and all evidence related to your brother's death. That includes any copies or backups you may have made. Sarah turned slowly. Max was no longer just alert. He was coiled, ready to spring into action if necessary. Are you placing me under arrest, Captain? I'm trying to protect you from making a mistake that could destroy your career, your life. The way you protected Jimmy? The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Finally, Captain Reyes opened her desk drawer and pulled out a file folder. She placed it on the desk where Sarah could see the tab. Chen James, Internal Investigation. Your brother was under investigation for evidence tampering, Sarah. He was dirty. Whatever evidence he compiled, whatever story he told himself about. Corruption and cover-ups. He was trying to deflect attention from his own crimes. That's bullshit. Is it? How do you explain the cash deposits, the missing evidence? The fact that every drug bust he made seemed to result in smaller seizures than expected? Sarah felt the floor shifting beneath her feet. This was exactly what Morrison had said. The same accusations, the same implications. But coming from Captain Reyes, Jimmy's friend, their family's champion, it carried a different weight. Max pressed against her leg, warm and solid and real, the only constant in a world that kept changing shape around her. I don't believe you. Sarah said finally. I hoped you wouldn't have to know, but Internal Affairs has been building a case against Jimmy for 8 months. Morrison was the investigating officer, but he wasn't working alone. The evidence is overwhelming. Captain Reyes opened the file and spread photos across her desk. Bank records, surveillance footage, financial documents that painted a picture of a cop on the take, systematically stealing from evidence lockers and skimming money from drug busts. Sarah, I know this is hard, but your brother wasn't the man you thought he was, Max whimpered, the same broken sound he'd made at the airport. But this time Sarah understood what he was trying to tell her. This wasn't grief. It was recognition. How? Long have you been dirty, Captain? The question hung in the air like smoke. Captain Reyes's professional mask slipped for just a moment, and Sarah saw something cold and calculating underneath. I'm trying to help you, Detective. Don't make this harder than it has to be. The transfer. You initiated Jimmy's transfer to the airport task force. You put him right where the corruption was happening, right where he'd be blamed for crimes he didn't commit. Sarah, and when he started getting too close to the truth, you had Morrison set up the shooting. Make it look like a routine traffic. Stop gone wrong. Captain Reyes closed the file slowly. You're overwrought. Grief can make people see conspiracies where none exist. Max knew. Sarah looked down at the dog, who was staring at Captain Reyes with unwavering intensity. That's why he tried to warn Jimmy. That's why he recognized Morrison. And that's why he's staring at you like you're the enemy. Sarah, sit down. Let's talk about this rationally. But Sarah was already moving toward the door, Max beside her, both of them operating on pure instinct now. Trust no one, Jimmy had written. Trust no one except Max. Detective Chen, stop. That's an order. Sarah's hand was on the door handle when she heard the distinctive sound of a service weapon being drawn from its holster. She turned slowly, Max growling low in his throat. Captain Reyes was pointing her gun at Sarah's chest, her expression more sad than angry. I really hoped it wouldn't come to this, she said softly. Jimmy was supposed to take the fall and disappear quietly, but then that damn dog started acting up, and Morrison got sloppy, and now here we are. You're going to shoot me in police headquarters? Officer-involved shooting. You became erratic, threatened your commanding officer, reached for your weapon. Captain Reyes shrugged. Morrison will back up my story, so will half a dozen other officers who are on our payroll. Max was vibrating with controlled aggression, waiting for Sarah's command. But even a highly trained police dog couldn't outrun a bullet. How long? Sarah asked. 5 years, ever since budget cuts started eating into our overtime. Amazing how many problems can be solved with a steady flow of untraceable cash, and Jimmy figured it out. Jimmy was supposed to be a convenient scapegoat, clean record family man, the kind of cop who'd never be suspected of corruption until it was too late to matter. But he was smarter than we gave him credit for, started asking questions, building his own case. So you killed him. We protected. Our operation. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made. Sarah felt Max's body coil beside her, ready to spring. Her brother's partner, loyal to the end, preparing to defend her the same way he'd tried to defend Jimmy. "Captain," she said quietly, "you made one mistake." "What's that?" "You assumed I came here alone." The office door exploded inward. Federal. Agents in tactical gear flooded the room, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Captain Reyes spun toward the doorway, her gun wavering between targets. In the chaos, Max moved. 60 pounds of righteously angry German Shepherd hit Captain Reyes, center mass, sending her weapon flying across the room. She went down hard, Max pinning her to the floor with the same disciplined precision he'd used on Morrison. Sarah pulled out her phone and ended the call that had been running for the past 15 minutes. "FBI tip line," she said to the confused. "Federal agents. I figured if you couldn't trust local cops, it was time to call in outside help." Max looked up at her from his position on top of the corrupt captain, his tail wagging once. Mission accomplished, justice served, partner protected, just like Jimmy had trained him to do. Federal Building, downtown, 11:30 p.m. The interrogation. Room smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Sarah sat across from FBI Special Agent Maria Santos, watching surveillance footage on a laptop screen that showed her entire world falling apart in real time. Captain Reyes in handcuffs. Morrison being read his rights. 3 other officers from her precinct being led away in federal custody. Her police family, the people she'd trusted with her life for 4 years, revealed as nothing more than a criminal enterprise with badges. Max lay at her feet, his massive head resting on her boots. Even he seemed exhausted by the night's revelations. 12. "Officers," Agent Santos said quietly. "Airport security, TSA, Metro PD, even 2 federal air marshals. Your brother stumbled into the largest law enforcement corruption ring the Bureau has seen in 20 years. Sarah stared at the frozen image on the screen. Captain Reyes being pushed into the back of a federal vehicle, her face a mask of cold, fury. How long had they been operating? We think about 5 years. Started small, just skimming cash from drug seizures, taking a cut from dealers who wanted to avoid prosecution. But then someone got smart about it, organized it, turned it into a legitimate business. Legitimate. Clean money in, dirty money out. They'd seize real drug shipments, process them through evidence, then substitute similar quantities of harmless substances. The real drugs got sold back to different dealers through a network of corrupt contacts. Meanwhile, the official reports showed successful interdiction operations. Sarah felt sick. The public thought they were winning the war on drugs, and while the drugs just changed hands, got resold at premium prices because they came with a guarantee, police protection included. Max's ears twitched, and he lifted his head slightly. Through the interrogation room's one-way mirror, Sarah could see agents moving in the corridor. Outside, the investigation was still active, still unfolding, still revealing new layers of corruption with each passing hour. "Agent Santos," Sarah said carefully, "what happens to Max now?" "That's complicated." Santos closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. "Technically, Max is TSA property, but given that his handler is now a federal fugitive and his previous department is under investigation, his status is unclear. He's not property, he's family. Sarah, I understand the bond you formed, But Max is a highly trained police K-9. He's worth approximately $40,000 in training and certification. The government doesn't just give away assets like that. Max's amber eyes met Sarah's, and she saw something there that made her chest tighten. Resignation, the patient acceptance of an animal who'd been abandoned before and was prepared to be abandoned again. He found the evidence, Sarah said firmly. Max led me to the safety deposit box, warned me about Morrison, helped me identify Captain Reyes as dirty. Without him, none of this would have come to light. And we're grateful. But gratitude doesn't change federal regulations. Sarah's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Your brother should have minded his own business. This isn't over. She showed the message to Agent Santos, whose expression darkened. We need to talk about your safety, Santos said. The people we arrested tonight are just the tip of the iceberg. The trafficking network they were protecting has connections all over the country. Millions of dollars in product, hundreds of dealers, suppliers who aren't going to be happy about losing their police protection. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying that breaking up a corruption ring this size creates enemies. Powerful enemies. The kind who don't forget and don't forgive. Max's head came up sharply, his ears forward. He was staring at the door to the interrogation room, his body tense with alertness. Then Sarah heard it too. Footsteps in the corridor. Multiple sets. Moving fast, the door opened and David Martinez stepped inside. His TSA uniform was rumpled, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes were bright with something that looked like hope. Sarah, he said, I heard what happened. Are you okay? Max's reaction was immediate and confusing. The dog who'd been calm and trusting with David at the airport now backed away, a low growl rumbling in his chest. His lips pulled back slightly, revealing teeth that gleamed white in the fluorescent lighting. Max, easy, Sarah said, but the dog's behavior was setting off every alarm bell in her head. Max had been right about Morrison, right about Captain Reyes if he was reacting to David this way. Agent Santos, David said, extending his hand. David Martinez, Airport Security. I worked closely with Jimmy Chen and Max on the task force. Santos shook his hand, but Sarah noticed that the federal agent's posture had shifted slightly. More alert, more watchful. Mr. Martinez, we'll need to interview you about the task force operations. Given tonight's arrests, we're reviewing all airport security protocols. Of course, whatever you need. David's smile was warm, genuine. I just want to make sure Sarah and Max are safe. Jimmy was like a brother to me. I feel responsible for looking after his family. Max's growl deepened. He moved to position himself between David and Sarah, his massive body a furry shield of protection. That's strange, David said, his brow furrowing with concern. Max has never reacted to me like this before. Maybe the stress of everything that's happened. Maybe, Sarah said slowly. But she was thinking about the photograph in Jimmy's safety deposit box, the scratched-out face in the TSA uniform, the partial name tag that had read RIC, not Rick Morrison, Rico Martinez. David's full name was David Ricardo Martinez. David, Sarah said carefully, how long have you been working airport security? 6 years next month. Started right after I got out of the army. His smile never wavered, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Why? Just curious. It must be interesting work. It has its moments. David glanced at Agent Santos, then back to Sarah. Listen, I know this has been a difficult night. Why don't I take Max off your hands? Give you some time to process everything that's happened. Max's response was immediate and violent. The dog lunged forward, not attacking but making his position clear. Over my dead body. I don't think that's a good idea, Sarah said. Sarah, Max needs routine. Familiar surroundings, I can provide that. He seems pretty comfortable where he is. David's smile finally slipped. Just a fraction, just for a moment. But Sarah caught it. Agent Santos caught it too. Mr. Martinez, Santos said quietly, where were you tonight between 9 and 11 p.m.? At work. Running security sweeps in Terminal C. I can provide my badge access records if you need them. But Max was telling a different story. The dog was staring at David with the same expression he'd worn when looking at Morrison and Captain Reyes. Recognition, fear, betrayal. David, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Show me your badge." "What?" "Your TSA badge. Show it to me." David's hand moved to his chest, where his badge should have been. His fingers found empty fabric. "Must have left it in my locker," he said. "Security protocol, we're not supposed to wear them off duty." Sarah pulled out her phone and opened the photo of Jimmy's letter, the one where he'd written about trusting no one except Max. At the bottom, there was something she'd missed before. A small addition in different ink, like Jimmy had added it later. "P.S. If something happens to me, don't trust Rico. He's been asking too many questions about Max's alerts. I think he's been feeding information to someone. Rico, David Ricardo Martinez." The man who'd been so helpful, so concerned, so eager to take Max away from her. "Agent Santos," Sarah said quietly, "I think we need to call airport security. Check David's access records for tonight." David's expression shifted. The warm concern melted away, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You know," he said conversationally, "Jimmy always said you were too smart for your own good." Max exploded into motion, but David was ready for him, pulling a taser from his jacket and firing it in one smooth motion. The barbs hit Max in the chest, 50,000 volts dropping the powerful dog like a stone. "Max!" Sarah lunged toward her fallen partner, but Agent Santos grabbed her arm. "David Martinez," Santos said, her hand on her service weapon, "you're under arrest." "For what? Defending myself against an aggressive animal? For conspiracy, corruption, and accessory to murder." David laughed. "You'll need proof, evidence. All you have is the word of a dead cop and a traumatized dog." Sarah knelt beside Max, checking his pulse. The dog was unconscious but breathing, his massive chest rising and falling steadily. The toughened taser barbs had left small wounds in his fur, tiny pinpricks that wept blood onto her hands. "You bastard," she whispered. "Sarah, your brother was going to destroy everything we'd built. Years of careful planning, millions of dollars in operations, all because he got sentimental about a dog. So you killed him. I provided information, location, timing, patrol routes. Morrison handled the actual logistics. Agent Santos had her weapon drawn now, pointed at David's chest. Hands where I can see them. But David wasn't done talking. "You want to know the beautiful part? Jimmy trusted me right up until the end. Called me that night, said Max was acting strange, said he thought someone was watching him, asked if I'd noticed anything suspicious." Sarah's vision went red around the edges. "What did you tell him?" "I told him it was probably just stress. Suggested he take Max home early, skip the late patrol. Take the route through Riverside. Quieter streets, less traffic. Right into the ambush. Right into justice. Your brother was a threat to national security, Sarah. The drug money we were redirecting, it was funding anti-terrorism operations that Congress wouldn't approve. Black budget stuff, the kind of work that keeps Americans safe. You're insane. I'm a patriot, and your brother was a naive idealist who couldn't see the bigger picture." Max stirred at Sarah's feet, a low whimper escaping his throat. His amber eyes fluttered open, unfocused but alive. "Easy, boy," Sarah murmured. "I've got you." David's voice softened, taking on the concerned tone he'd used at the airport. "Sarah, you don't understand what you're getting involved in. This corruption ring, it's bigger than just a few dirty cops. It goes all the way to Washington. People in very high places who will do anything to protect their operations. Then we'll take them all down. With what? Your brother's USB drive has already been compromised. The evidence he collected is worthless now. We had people inside the FBI who've been sanitizing files for months." Agent Santos's expression didn't change, but Sarah caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Santos hadn't known about FBI involvement. "How many?" Santos asked quietly. "Enough. More than enough." David's smile was cold. "Sarah, you can still walk away from this. Take Max, disappear, start over somewhere else. We'll make sure you have resources, protection, a new identity if necessary. In exchange for what? Your silence, your brother is dead. Nothing you do can bring him back, but you're still alive. Max is still alive. That's worth something." Sarah looked down at Max, who was struggling to get to his feet. The dog was disoriented. From the taser, But his eyes were clear, focused on her face with unwavering loyalty. "You know what, David? You're right about one thing. Jimmy is dead, and nothing I do can bring him back." She stood slowly, helping Max to his feet. "But I can make sure his death meant something. I can make sure the people who killed him pay for what they've done. Sarah. And I can make sure that every dirty cop, every corrupt agent, every lying bureaucrat who thought they could hide behind a badge gets exactly what they deserve." Max was steady now, standing beside her like a furry sentinel. His amber eyes were fixed on David with laser intensity. "Agent Santos," Sarah said quietly, "I think it's time we found out just how deep this corruption goes." David's mask finally fell away completely. "You have no idea what you're starting. Then I guess we're about to find out." Sarah's apartment, 2:47 a.m. The Federal Protection Detail had cleared her building twice, posted agents at every entrance, and swept her apartment for listening devices. Sarah sat on her couch, Max's head heavy in her lap, watching the sun struggle toward dawn through bulletproof glass that had been installed while she was at the Federal Building. Her life had been turned upside down in the space of 6 hours. Her police career was effectively over. Too many people in her department couldn't be trusted. Her apartment was now a safe house. Her brother's death had been recontextualized from tragic accident to calculated murder. And the dog sleeping fitfully in her lap was the only family she had left in the world. Max whimpered in his sleep, his legs twitching as he chased dream ghosts through some mental landscape that only he could see. Sarah stroked his ears gently, the rhythm soothing them both. Her phone rang. "Agent Santos. Sarah, we need to talk. Can you come in? What time is it?" "Early, but this can't wait." Santos's voice was tight with stress. "We've been going through the files your brother collected. The corruption is worse than we thought." "How?" "Much worse. 14 FBI agents, 6 DEA officers, 2 federal judges, a deputy attorney general." Santos paused. "And that's just what we've confirmed in the last 4 hours." Sarah closed her eyes. Jimmy had stumbled into something massive, a web of corruption that reached into the highest levels of federal law enforcement. What does that mean for the investigation? "It means we can't trust normal channels. It means we're working with a skeleton crew of people we're absolutely certain are clean. And it means that the people we're investigating have resources we can barely imagine." Max's eyes opened, alert despite his exhaustion. His ears were forward, listening to something Sarah couldn't hear. "Agent Santos, are you calling from a secure line?" "Of course. Why?" "Because Max is acting like someone's listening." Through the phone, Sarah heard the sound of Santos moving quickly, footsteps echoing in what sounded like a stairwell. "Jesus," Santos muttered. "You're right, we may have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where we can't trust anyone." "Sarah, I need you to pack a bag. Essential items only. We're moving you to a different safe house." "When?" "Now. I'm sending a detail to pick you up in 10 minutes. Sarah was already moving, Max beside her, both of them operating on pure survival. Instinct. "Santos, how do I know I can trust the detail you're sending?" "You don't. But you can trust Max. If he doesn't like them, don't go." The line went dead. Sarah threw clothes into a duffel bag, her hands shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. Max watched her pack, his body language tense but controlled. Ready for anything. A knock at the door. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 2 more. The signal Santos had given her. Max's reaction was immediate. He moved to the door, sniffed deeply, then looked back at Sarah with an expression she was learning to read. Danger. Her phone buzzed. Text from Santos. "Change of plans. Stay put. Do not open the door." Another knock, more insistent this time. Detective Chen, a male voice muffled through the reinforced door. "FBI. Agent Santos sent us to escort you to a secure location." Max's growl was barely audible, but Sarah felt it vibrating through his body. He was pressed against her leg, every muscle coiled and ready. "Can you show me your credentials?" Sarah called out. "Of course. I'm sliding them under the door now." A badge appeared in the gap beneath her door. It looked official, complete with photo ID and federal insignia. But Max was telling a different story. The dog was staring at the door like it was a gateway to hell. Sarah's phone rang. Santos again. Don't answer the door, the agent said without preamble. Those aren't our people. Then who are they? I don't know, but the real extraction team is still 20 minutes out. The knocking stopped. Sarah and Max stood in the center of her living room, listening to silence that felt more dangerous than noise. Then Max did something that made Sarah's blood freeze. He backed away from the door, positioning himself between Sarah and the windows. His ears were flat against his skull, his lips pulled back in a silent snarl. "Santos," Sarah whispered into the phone. "I think they're coming in." The first window exploded inward in a shower of safety glass. Dark figures rappelled into her living room, moving with military precision, weapons drawn and ready. Max launched himself at the nearest intruder without hesitation. 60 pounds of righteously angry German shepherd collided with a man in tactical gear, sending him sprawling across Sarah's coffee table. The man's weapon skittered across the floor as Max's jaws found his arm. "Max, out!" Sarah shouted, and the dog immediately released his target and returned to her side. "Detective Chen," one of the intruders said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We're here to help." "Help with what?" "Keeping you alive. The corruption investigation has been compromised. There are people in federal law enforcement who want you silenced permanently." Max's growl deepened. Whatever these people were, he didn't trust them. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded. The lead intruder removed his helmet, revealing a weathered face and gray hair. "Colonel James Mitchell, U.S. Army Intelligence. Your brother was working with us." "That's impossible. Jimmy was Metro PD. Jimmy was recruited 6 months before his death. We'd been tracking the corruption network for 2 years, but we needed someone on the inside. Someone clean. Someone the criminals would trust." Sarah felt the world tilt sideways again. "You got my brother killed." "Your brother volunteered for a dangerous mission. He knew the risks." "Bullshit. Detective Chen, we don't have time for this. The people who killed your brother are mobilizing. They know about the USB drive, about the evidence he collected, about your involvement with Agent Santos. They're coming for you tonight." Max was staring at Colonel Mitchell with intense concentration, processing information that only he could understand. Then the dog did something that surprised everyone in the room. He sat down and offered his paw. "Well," Mitchell said with a slight smile, "at least someone trusts me." Sarah looked at Max, then at the colonel, then at the tactical team that had just broken into her apartment. "If Jimmy was working with you, prove it." Mitchell reached into his vest and pulled out a small item that made Sarah's breath catch. A dog collar, leather, worn, with a brass nameplate that read Max and a phone. Number she recognized, Jimmy's cell phone number. "Your brother asked us to take care of Max if anything happened to him," Mitchell said quietly. "He said the dog was the only partner he'd ever trusted completely." Sarah took the collar with shaking hands. It smelled like Jimmy, gun oil, and peppermint gum and the cologne he'd worn since high school. "Why didn't you contact me sooner?" "Because we weren't sure if you were clean. Corruption investigations are like cancer. You never know how far the disease has spread until you start cutting." Mitchell's expression was grim. "But Max's behavior at the airport convinced us. Dogs don't lie, Detective. They don't have hidden agendas or political motivations. Max recognized you as family, which means Jimmy talked about you. A lot." Max nuzzled Sarah's hand, then looked up at her with those impossibly intelligent amber eyes. For the first time since Jimmy's death, Sarah felt something other than grief and anger. She felt purpose. "Colonel," she said quietly, "what do you need me to do?" "Help us finish what your brother started. The corruption network is bigger than just dirty cops and federal agents. We're talking about a criminal enterprise that's been using law enforcement infrastructure to move drugs, launder money, and eliminate threats for over 5 years. Including threats like Jimmy. And now threats like you." Sarah looked around her destroyed living room. Glass crunched under her feet as she moved to her brother's photograph on the mantelpiece. Somehow it had survived the tactical entry intact. In the photo, Jimmy was laughing at some long-forgotten joke, his eyes bright with life and humor. He looked young, invincible, like he believed the world was basically good, and that justice always won in the end. He died believing that. Sarah picked up the photograph and held it against her chest. How do we take them down? Carefully, methodically, and with help from the only witness who can't be corrupted, intimidated, or killed. Mitchell looked at Max, who was sitting perfectly at attention, every inch the professional police dog he'd been trained to be. Your brother taught Max to recognize specific scents associated with the drug operation, not just narcotics, money, packaging materials, even the cologne worn by specific individuals involved in the network. Max is a living evidence database. More than that, Max can identify people your brother suspected, but never had enough evidence to arrest. People who are still operating, still moving product, still thinking they're untouchable. Sarah knelt beside Max and looked into his amber eyes. "Oh, what do you think, boy? Ready to finish what Jimmy started?" Max's tail thumped once against the floor, a soft rhythm that sounded like agreement, like determination, like justice. "Colonel Mitchell," Sarah said, standing up with renewed resolve. "Where do we start?" "We start by trusting each other. You, me, Max, and a very small team of people who loved your brother enough to risk everything to get justice for his death." Sarah clipped Jimmy's collar around Max's neck, beside his existing tags. The dog stood still for the ceremony, as if he understood the significance of the moment. "Then let's get to work." Metropolitan International Airport, Terminal C, 6:23. The terminal was nearly empty in the pre-dawn hours, just a few early commuters and red-eye passengers shuffling through security with the glazed expressions of the chronically sleep-deprived. Perfect cover for an operation that had been 18 months in the planning. Sarah crouched behind a pillar near Gate 15. Max pressed against her side, both of them watching the TSA checkpoint through high-powered binoculars. "Colonel Mitchell's..." Voice crackled softly in her earpiece. "Falcon 1, do you have eyes on target?" "Affirmative," Sarah whispered. "David Martinez just arrived for his shift. He's at Security Station 3. Copy that. Remember, we need him to lead us to the main distribution point. No arrests until we have the entire network." Max's ears were forward, alert but calm. He wore a modified tactical vest that contained recording equipment and a GPS tracker. If they got separated, the Army intelligence team would be able to find him. But Sarah had no intention of letting that happen. "Movement at Checkpoint 2, another voice reported through the comm system. 3 individuals with large carry-on bags. Could be our couriers. Sarah adjusted her position to get a better view. Through the binoculars, she could see 3 travelers who didn't quite fit the normal airport pattern. Too alert, too watchful, moving with the subtle coordination of people who'd worked together. Before Max's nose twitched, and he looked up at Sarah with an expression she was learning to interpret. Recognition. "Mitchell, Max is reacting. These might be our people. Let them through security. We need to see where they go." Sarah watched as the 3 suspects moved through the TSA checkpoint with remarkable efficiency. No delays, no additional screening, no random bag checks. They were waved through like VIPs, their large carry-ons never opened for inspection. "That's not normal," Sarah muttered. "No," Mitchell agreed through the comm. "It's not. Falcon 3, are you recording this?" "Every second," came the reply from Agent Santos, who was positioned in the observation deck overlooking the security area. "We've got clear footage of preferential treatment." The 3 suspects moved deeper into the terminal, heading toward the baggage claim area. Strange destination for people who just passed through security. "They're going the wrong way," Sarah observed. Max was getting more agitated, his body language shifting from alert to excited. He wanted to follow, to pursue, to do what he'd been trained to do. "Easy, boy," Sarah whispered. "Not yet." David Martinez finished his conversation with a TSA supervisor and began walking toward the baggage claim area, following the same route as the 3 suspects. Sarah felt her heart rate spike. "Mitchell, David's following them. This might be it. Stay back. Let them establish the meeting point." Sarah and Max shadowed David through the terminal, staying far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to maintain visual contact. The dog moved like a ghost beside her, his paws silent on the polished floor. The baggage claim area was nearly deserted. A few travelers waited by silent carousels, checking their phones and yawning. But in the far corner, near the oversized luggage section, a group was forming. David Martinez, the 3 suspects from security, 2 TSA supervisors, a janitor who wasn't cleaning anything, an airline employee who should have been on the tarmac, and in the center of the group, a woman in an expensive business suit who made Sarah's blood freeze, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Morrison, Rick Morrison's sister, the federal prosecutor, who'd been handling drug cases in the district for the past 3 years. "Jesus Christ," Sarah breathed. "What is it?" Mitchell's voice was sharp in her earpiece. "Rachel Morrison, federal prosecutor. She's here." A moment of silence, then, "How deep does this go?" Before Sarah could answer, Max tensed beside her. His ears were flat against his skull, his lips pulling back in a silent snarl. But he wasn't looking at the group near the baggage carousel. He was looking behind them. Sarah turned and found herself face to face with Captain Elizabeth Reyes. Her former commanding officer was supposed to be in federal custody. Instead, she was standing in the airport terminal, wearing civilian clothes and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Sarah. Hello, Max. How?" Sarah's hand moved toward her weapon, but Captain Reyes shook her head. "I wouldn't. Look around." Sarah's blood went cold as she realized the truth. The tired commuters, the bored travelers, the airport employees, they were all looking at her now. All of them armed, all of them part of the network. "You walked into a trap," Captain Reyes said softly, "just like your brother did." Through her earpiece, Sarah heard Mitchell's voice. "Falcon 1, what's your status?" But she couldn't answer, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "The federal investigation was compromised from the beginning," Captain Reyes continued. "Agent Santos, Colonel Mitchell, even the Army intelligence operation, all of it designed to draw you out, to make you reveal what Jimmy had discovered." "That's impossible, is it? How do you think we stayed ahead of every investigation for 5 years? How do you think we eliminated threats before they became problems?" Captain Reyes's smile was cold. "We don't just have people inside law enforcement, Sarah. We are law enforcement." Max was vibrating with controlled aggression, but Sarah could see the tactical situation clearly. Too many guns, too many angles. Even a highly trained police dog couldn't take down 20 armed opponents. "What do you want?" Sarah asked. "The same thing we wanted from Jimmy, cooperation. You've seen how deep this operation goes. You understand the futility of fighting it. Join us and you'll be protected, you'll be wealthy. You'll be part of something bigger than yourself. And if I refuse, then you'll end up like your brother. And Max will end up in a shelter where accidents happen to inconvenient animals." Sarah felt her world collapsing again. Everything she'd believed, everyone she'd trusted. It was all lies built on lies built on lies. But then Max did something that changed everything. He barked, one sharp, clear bark that echoed through the baggage claim area like a gunshot. And, in response, every light in Terminal C went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red. In the chaos and confusion, Sarah heard Mitchell's voice in her earpiece, but it sounded different now, clearer, more authoritative. "This is Colonel Mitchell to all units. Execute, execute, execute." The terminal erupted. Federal agents in full tactical gear poured through every entrance. Real federal agents, Sarah realized. Not the corrupt ones who'd been running the investigation, but a parallel team that had been watching the watchers. In the red emergency lighting, Sarah saw Captain Reyes reaching for her weapon. But Max was faster. The dog launched himself through the air, 60 pounds of righteous fury, and hit Captain Reyes center mass. Both of them went down hard, but Max was up first, standing over his target with professional precision. "Max, hold!" Sarah commanded, and the dog obeyed, pinning Captain Reyes to the floor without attacking. Around them, the real operation was unfolding. David Martinez in handcuffs, Rachel Morrison being read her rights, TSA supervisors and airport employees being separated and detained, the careful network that had taken 5 years to build crumbling in 5 minutes. "Sarah!" Agent Santos appeared through the chaos, but she was flanked by agents Sarah didn't recognize. "Are you okay?" "Santos, I thought you were part of the conspiracy. We couldn't be sure who to trust, so we let the corrupt investigation proceed, while building a parallel case." Santos's expression was grim. "Your brother's evidence was real, Sarah, but we had to make sure we got everyone. Colonel Mitchell emerged from the crowd of federal agents, his weathered face split by a genuine smile. "Your dog just gave us the signal we needed." That bark was his way of saying the trap was complete. Sarah looked down at Max, who was still holding Captain Reyes in place but wagging his tail slightly. "You knew, didn't you? You knew they were all here." Max's amber eyes met hers, and she saw intelligence there that went beyond training. Intuition, loyalty, love. Jimmy trained him for this, Mitchell explained. Taught him to recognize not just individual scents, but patterns, groups of people, who worked together. Max has been mapping this criminal network for 2 years, learning to identify every member by scent and behavior. He's not just a police dog, Sarah realized. He's a living database of criminal intelligence. The most expensive and effective undercover agent in federal law enforcement history, Santos agreed. And he just helped us wrap up the largest corruption case in Justice Department history. Captain Reyes glared up at Sarah from beneath Max's. "Pause. This isn't over. You have no idea how many people are involved, how far this reaches." "You're right," Sarah said quietly. "I don't know how far it reaches, but Max does." She knelt down beside her brother's partner, scratching behind his ears the way Jimmy used to do. "Don't you, boy? You know every scent, every connection, every dirty cop and corrupt agent and criminal prosecutor who thought they were untouchable." Max's tail thumped once against the floor. Justice served, mission complete, partner protected, just like Jimmy had trained him to do. 1 year later, Riverside Memorial Cemetery. The morning mist clung to the grass like forgiveness, soft and grey, and healing. Sarah knelt beside Jimmy's headstone. Max stretched out beside her in the cool earth, both of them comfortable in the silence that had become their shared language over the past 12 months. The headstone was simple black granite, with Jimmy's name, dates, and shield number etched in clean lines. But someone had left additions: a worn rope toy faded from weather and time, a small American flag that snapped gently in the autumn breeze, fresh flowers that were replaced every week by visitors Sarah never saw, but always suspected were other. Cops, other canine handlers, other people whose lives Jimmy had touched in ways she was still discovering. "The trial starts next week," Sarah said softly, her fingers tracing the letters of Jimmy's name. Morrison, Captain Reyes, Rachel Morrison, David Martinez, all of them. Federal court, federal charges, maximum sentences if they're convicted. Max's ear twitched, but he didn't lift his head from his paws. He'd been different since the airport operation, calmer, more settled, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Justice had been served. His partner's death had been avenged. He could rest now. Agent Santos says we'll probably both have to testify. You especially. The prosecution wants to introduce evidence about your scent identification abilities. How? You mapped the criminal network. Sarah scratched behind Max's ears and he sighed with contentment. "You're going to be famous, boy. The canine who brought down the biggest corruption ring in federal history." A sound of footsteps on the gravel path made both of them look up. Colonel Mitchell approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee and walking with the careful precision of someone who spent too much time behind a desk and not enough time in the field. "Morning, Sarah, Max." He handed her one of the cups and settled onto the grass beside them. "Beautiful day for a cemetery visit." Jimmy always liked mornings like this, quiet, peaceful. Sarah sipped her coffee, grateful for the warmth. "Any word from the prosecutors?" "They're confident. The evidence your brother collected, combined with what Max helped us gather, should be enough to convict everyone we arrested, plus a few more that we're still tracking down." "How many more?" 14 additional suspects in 6 different states. The network was bigger than we thought, but it's unraveling fast. Turns out criminals don't handle pressure well when they realize their dog-proof system wasn't actually dog-proof. Max's tail thumped once against the ground, a soft rhythm that Sarah